Hello, welcome back to The Living Process. My name is Greg Madison. And in this episode, we have probably one of the best known people in the focusing world joining us. And that's Nadalou. Nada has been a part of the focusing world for a very long time in many different ways. Of course, she's been a teacher of focusing and has taught a lot in Australia and China, as well as around Europe and North America. And she also was very instrumental with Gene in developing the thinking at the edge model. But Nada's also very well known for all of the videos that she has made over the years of Gene presenting his philosophy and presenting focusing at conferences at the Focusing Institute Summer School. Actually, the summer school is something that Nada instigated as a fundraiser for the Institute. So we talk about biospirituality, thinking at the edge, Nada's creative video work, her teaching around the world, and some of her ideas and some of her kind of message to the rest of the community in terms of what she would like to see us remember, I guess, about Gene's teachings. It was a wonderful conversation from my point of view. And I'm very grateful to Nada that we got to talk and finally got her in front of the camera instead of always behind the camera. So here's my conversation with Nadalou. And I'm very pleased to have Nadalou as my guest today. And Nada, you are very well known in the focusing world. Anyone that's been a part of the international focusing scene knows you. Usually the first question I ask, and I would like to ask you this because I don't know the answer to this, is how did you find out about focusing? How did you end up sort of in this strange world of focusing and Gendlin's work?
Can it be a long story or a short story?
It can be both.
Yeah, I found about Gene's work by finding focusing book on the shelf, but I need to start with a little bit of my history and who I am and where I came from, because it becomes instrumental to understand my position vis-a-vis focusing.
Yeah, please do. I would love to hear that.
Well, the one thing I don't want to spend too long time on, I spent first 28 years in Yugoslavia. That was Yugoslavia, and that countries changed from kingdom into fascist supported Germany, into change from kingdom into communism that shocked the whole world. And during that time, I left Yugoslavia. No, it was Yugoslavia, communist Yugoslavia, but it impacted my whole personality because the change, communism coming into forced into country that didn't exist yet, was in experiential way like we were something in the society, in the town where I lived, the family well known and so on, to a change practically overnight into some partisans who were mostly not very educated and lived in woods.
Mm-hmm.
It came over, and whatever was good before became the very opposite. And individuality immediately non-existent. You are nobody. And so there is a fact about being, what would I call it, the outside changing so rapidly that certain confusion enter into my way of being. So
let me just take that in. That is such a very specific and powerful kind of beginning to find that the world around you gets turned upside down, and of course has a huge impact on how you understand yourself and your place in the world.
yes, thank you. And as the result of it, I left the country like so many other people, and it was, well, escape by staying outside, by not returning from visiting my mother in Germany, where I spent a year, then going to Australia as an immigrant because I had family there, and then coming to Canada in 6 years after I spent in Australia. So there was a lot of inner change, language change. And in Canada, I ended up in Quebec, which is very much Roman Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where beginning of my discovering focusing itself actually changing, it came in. I first experienced that people were religious and having different kinds of churches and different kinds of methods to understand Christianity, which I didn't practice at home because we were not allowed. We were using religion as a sign that we are against communism, but there was no inner word. So this is where I reached out and started to get confused about inner life and who was Jesus and what kind of Catholic and Protestant and all kinds of religions. So that kind of moved me into a direction of I want to find out who Jesus was and what did he say. This was a strong reaction to everything that I said so far, which I am happy to leave behind.
Mm-hmm. So can I just check that with you? It's
Please do.
A part of your identifying with Christianity was in part that it set you as separate from the communism that you had left behind. But then you came across different forms of Christianity and you decided that you wanted to find out for yourself. It's like a kind of your own experiential quest or something. You wanted to find out which version of Jesus is the right one for you.
Not version of Jesus. I wanted to find out what Jesus actually said.
Aha. So let me say that back. Okay. So this was a journey to find out what did he actually say.
That's right.
Yeah.
The historic Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my decision to take a degree in theology. I had a degree in physical education from Yugoslavia, but I took a degree in Christian theology, which I never used for anything else but for myself privately.
Wow.
And through that, I discovered Ignatius of Loyola that has Ignatian exercises. Mm-hmm. And I bumped into group that was practicing Ignatian exercises, and the person who was my director said to me, "Have you ever heard about focusing?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Would you like to try it?" And I said, "Yes, really, I would." And I was sold.
Wow.
And she was talking about Ed and Pete, Ed McMahon and Pete Campbell.
Yeah.
And I, in Ignatian, uh, there was a place where we practiced. There was a bookshelf, and there was focusing book, Gene Gendlin's focusing book. And I remember bringing it home and reading it and saying, "Wow, wow, wow." And the same person that introduced me to it said, "By the way, Fathers Ed McMahon and Pete Campbell are coming to Toronto. I live in Montreal. Would you like to go?" And I did. And that's how I connected to bar spiritual focusing
Mm.
in my core.
Can I just ask, what was it when you saw the book? What was it that you recognized there that felt so right to you?
The book itself, I wouldn't be able to comment why the book was so important, except that it became important connection. But the fact that Ed and Pete introduced me actually to Gene by their teaching, and I felt this I repeat very often. I felt spiritual desire to uh, discover my spiritual uh, questions with both feet on the ground.
Mm-hmm. That's a nice way to put it. A kind of a very grounded sort of spiritual adventure.
And this connects to the sentence, "I wanted to find out what Jesus said."
Mm-hmm.
My version of what I understand in it, this came like, that's allowing me to be religious, which I am not, with both feet on the ground.
That feels kind of exciting to me, to think that there's a way of being religious with both feet on the ground.
Yeah, because I'm not religious. I'm Catholic by birth, but I'm not a religious person. But what I received in Ignatian exercises is certain practices that I still practice myself from time to time, and I say kind of without fear to say that Ignatius, I guess 16th century or so Spaniard, was having focusing ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the exercises there is what is called examine, not examination, but examine, following your daily kind of how you spent the day and checking inside how it feels.
Mm.
So it's kind of a touch of something that focusing became many years later, but he had it. And then Taylor Desjardins was an important part of my studies while I was doing degree.
Can I just ask, what when you met with Pete and Ed, kind of what happened next? Somehow you ended up becoming even more sort of central in the focusing world. I'm wondering how that happened.
Well, I attended several of their workshops in States and in Canada, and they were talking all the time about Gene.
Okay.
Gene said that, and Gene said this, and that's how it. And the fact that let me just get it right, that they pointed towards the sense of being capable with your own in your own body to get connected to I don't want to call it higher power. They call it extreme. They have a word for it. A consciousness that you are part of, like a cell, and you feel. And they were, of course, fighting in some way. They were Jesuits, but they left Jesuit order because they wanted to do by spiritual focusing, and they described the finding that felt sense in yourself, that like an iceberg, that people think, think of things and feel things, and feelings are and rules and regulations that all from neck up. And they said, we don't go into body because we don't know, but the stories that come with your problems or ideas or whatever are actually stored in the body as well. And the body has this felt sense that is attached to the story, and the felt sense is available to you because your body is part of a bigger body, but you don't know how to find this extraordinary consciousness. That felt sense kind of opens the door to. So they were saying you have a teacher inside yourself, and the teacher inside yourself is finding way to be with story that is very difficult to we avoid it, and we don't want to hear about it. It's too big and so on. To learn to go from this is how they say, from pushing it away to connecting in the heart. And they call that caring, feeling, presence.
I remember that term. One of the first focusing experiences I had was when I lived in Ireland, and it was biospiritual. There were two people that came from Canada and America. I think it was Bob and Carol, or Bob and...
Yes. And priest and nun.
Yes.
Yes.
And when I think back to that, although they had different language, like caring, feeling, presence, there was two things. One is it felt very, very similar to Gene's own method. Some different language, like taking an inventory. Some of the language was slightly different, but pointing towards the same thing. And yet, I don't know if it's because it was often taught in seminaries and monasteries and places like that, but it often had a kind of a spiritual or slightly more expansive feeling to it.
Yes.
And I don't know exactly why. Or do you know, was it did you feel it was pretty much the same as Gene's method, or was there something kind of qualitatively different for you?
It is more or less same as Gene's.
Yeah.
There is emphasis that you have it already in your body because you are part of a bigger body that you are not aware, because you are thinking only from neck up. This caring, feeling, presence is a necessity to learn how to dwell with something that is so terribly heavy or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually that attitude that allows the deeper opening up into whatever more of the story actually is.
And that it comes, and they call it it uh, it comes as if we leave some space for grace.
Yeah, exactly. The word grace, I remember that. And that is a nice description for when there's some kind of a shift or some kind of a movement or something in the body.
That's right, and that you know that you didn't do it, but it
Yeah.
came somehow appeared, and yet it was already there.
Hmm. That's where it starts to feel like there's something a little bit more than me involved.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. There is a story, a story of a kind about Ed and Pete being living in Ottawa doing their PhD and really looking for something special themselves. And they were still Jesuits. And it was, I guess, in 60s, maybe. No, it would have been later than that. I can't remember the years exactly. And Gene lived in New York, and Ed and Pete decided to go and meet Gene and ask him some questions. And Ed was always kind of well, not in charge, but the one who is more outspoken
Okay.
in direct way. And then so they came to Gene's door, and the description of the whole incident was so funny that, you know, they were in Jesuit clothes yet still. And Gene was in an apartment, and there were just boxes to sit on somewhere, not really anywhere to sit. And Gene was quiet for a while when they came in, and the two of them were thinking, well, you know what? And he was quiet, and he says, "You're okay, guys. We're going to be okay." So Ed said, "I want to ask you something." So Ed asked Gene, "Do the steps you call focusing make the felt shift happen? Or is there another factor at work?" And Gene was very quiet for a while. And then he said, "Steps don't make it happen." And then a little bit quiet. And then he said, "There is what you guys call grace as this factor."
Nice that he used language from their tradition.
That's right. And then he said, Ed said, "We are in business." The felt sense has, and felt shift has two things that are support, that we call in religion different. Felt sense is a doorway. And in felt sense, when some shift happens, there is energy. You feel different, you are uplifted, you know that something happened. And this is what in Christian language is called grace. So then this energy that your body perceives, and it's not that you made it.
Yeah.
So it's the grace. And the other thing is that there is information in it. There is new thing that comes that changes things. And that information is called revelation. the information is kind of in Christian language, revelation.
Revelation. So the felt sense has those two qualities. It has the quality of grace, because we don't make it happen, but somehow we have to be open to it, I guess.
That's right. It comes.
It comes. And when it comes, it offers revelation, new information about something.
New information. That symbol, when you have an image of something, is not a replica of what you're feeling, but it's interacting with your feltness. I don't know if I explain it properly, so I'll let you judge.
Well, let me say it back to you, that what Gene would say is that the symbol that comes when you're focusing, the symbol isn't some kind of explanation of the felt sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not some kind of equivalency. It's not like the symbol is somehow the answer.
That's right.
The symbol is,
Interacts with
it interacts with the felt sense.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I'm curious how you made the bridge from the biospiritual world to, as I know, I mean, meeting and working with Gene himself.
I started to teach it to people who wanted to hear it locally at home and so on. And the way that I found my way of teaching it was following their steps, but with my kind of way of doing it, because their steps are a little bit different. and I teaching a group of people, I did not use religious language or spiritual language, because I didn't feel that everybody would want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was anybody who was asking for it, how is it connected to inner work of spirituality or religion, I would then bring the details of what Ed and Pete say. But otherwise, I follow the steps that I kind of adjusted to my own personality.
Okay.
So I didn't call it nada, so I would still call it biospirit. Sometimes I would call it biospiritual, but then if I knew that I was in a situation where people will go like that, if there is spirituality brought in, I would not use it. But Ed and Pete were the first ones who dared to mention spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Elfrid Hinkertoff was teaching also, but in Japan and places like that. But Ed and Pete were kind of with both feet on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So I started to teach. So I taught in Australia for many years in winter time, and I trained many people there, quite a few in Sydney and in other cities. I kind of learned to be with them in the way that I appreciated focusing. And later on, even through the TAE. And then on the trips to Australia, I would stop in New Zealand as well, because there was a nun who was my friend, became my friend, and I would teach there, and she would have big groups, big groups in Auckland. And then one day somebody from Hong Kong asked me about DVDs, and that story is already told. And I said, "Oh, I'll stop by and bring you." And then I started to teach it there as well. So for, I would say, for maybe 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
it was Sydney, Auckland, and Hong Kong. And then I started to teach it in other places, in Europe, at workshops, internationals and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I developed my own style. And as I said, I didn't call it anything, but I would call it either just focusing, depending where I was, or biospiritual focusing. But the method was the same,
Mm-hmm.
except I would go into spiritually sensitive areas, depending on who was learning.
It was the same method, but you would be sensitive to the audience
That's
and,
right.
and what they wanted to learn, I guess, what they were there for.
And if they had a desire to know if there is something of, because they would be impressed with the shifts when they came and how come.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a question, that it's not from you, but it comes as a space for grace.
Mm-hmm. I can understand in the way that you were teaching it, you were quite flexible depending upon the audience. You were careful, I think, kind of to adopt the language that would suit the audience to some extent.
Right.
So if you had an audience that was open to spirituality and they asked, like, where does the shift come from? You would be able to say, well, that's grace. And that's something they would be able to relate to. But the audiences that weren't spiritual or religious, if they asked, where does the shift come from? How would you deal with the question from them? Because you would want to avoid anything that would alienate them.
Let me go into a memory.
Yeah.
The way that I started with the group always was with the exercise. And the exercise went to quiet down, to take their attention inside, go a little bit, quieting body, and that I'm going to lead them through certain situations, and that they don't answer to me, that they remember, and we talk about it later on. And I would bring them to a short, not clearing the space, but taking inventory, because Ed and Pete call it taking inventory, and it suits me much better than clearing the space. So I would ask them for something pleasant, something that is not pleasant, and something else is there. So in that way, I would bring them from the room and other people sitting around them into their own territory. And this, so there is more elaboration, something pleasant, something. I don't know if I started too bad or pleasant. It depended, to find out something that's calling for attention, and they might feel it in the body, and how do they feel it, and to remember where it is, like to have a name for it, and then to return back to the body and ask themselves, is there anything that is not pleasant, that is a problem? And ask yourself, how does that feel? Where do you feel? And does it have a name? Does it have a shape or color or whatever? And also to leave that. And then to go to third question, is there anything else that comes to you out of blue? So have that as well. And last thing that I asked them, so if all the things that you touched on right now, the 3 or 4 things, were somehow resolved, how would it be in your center?
Mhm.
And I gave them time, and they were not talking during that time. And then when that finished, I would say, if you were to do some more work on something, which one would be the one you would like to stay with? So that's clearing the space in really minimal,
Mhm.
but it was already experiential before I would enter into anything else.
Yeah, so you would start with the experience of taking an inventory and inviting them to get a sense of what it would actually feel like if all of those things in their life were okay. And then to imagine if they were going to go back to one, which one would they pick?
That's right.
So it's almost like at the very beginning, before you've introduced focusing, you've set them up to focus on something.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then I would open it up for people to share if they want, and
Mm.
also to feel safe not to share if they don't want, and also the security that other people do not say anything, so it's safe.
Yeah.
And out of their questions would come, how come, how come. So it's hard to answer the question. It's a good question, but it's every time different.
Hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes I would say if it was a positive, it was a shift. It usually didn't shift at the very beginning, but if somebody volunteered to do the focusing, then I would do focusing in front of the group.
Mhm.
And with the safety that nobody touches it, it's sacred ground. I would call it sacred ground.
Okay. That makes sense to me.
So this is how I handled focusing.
Yeah.
Do you want to know any? And I would still handle it same way now.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. To me, that's quite a classical kind of focusing, uh,
Basics.
sort of, well, I think a classical way of introducing focusing and introducing kind of getting the space to have a felt sense. A lot can be learned by
Yes.
presenting it that way.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm still curious how you met Gene and what that was like.
It was one year when Mary McGuire, who was in charge of uh, the week long, and basically Riva Bernstein was very kind, and she wanted to hear a little bit what I had to say, but they couldn't accept the idea of biospiritual focusing being focusing that can be certified. No way.
Hmm.
But there was the opportunity that Gene came and talked for uh, half a day or something, and there were names pulled out for somebody to sit with him, and I was one who got it. And I still remember every detail of it.
Wow.
honest. It was interesting to meet the person that I heard about so much, and the way that the shift came was just incredible.
Uh-huh.
And then after that meeting, uh, Kathy McGuire still insisted that I should come to International. That was, I can't remember where it was. And I was, by that time, I was already doing DVDs for VHS for Ed and Pete. And Kathy had idea that I should do something for him as well.
Oh, okay. Wow. What year was that? More or less?
1993 maybe.
Okay.
So I first videotaped Gene in Wisconsin, and this is coming home through focusing set.
Okay.
That's how I got into DVD, the VHS tapes, and I was amateur. I didn't know anything myself, but I did produce, by that time I did produce some videos for Ed and Pete already. So I came, as Gene said, that another angel was sent to us. And I came. So nobody was doing videotaping at the time. And I wasn't trained. I was total amateur and learned on the job like you.
I was just thinking, you're not the only amateur here.
Yeah.
That's amazing to have the confidence to do that when no one else was doing it. That's wonderful.
Well, it wasn't. I'm thinking about your word confidence.
Hmm.
It was such a desire to share it, to put it out, that I had to do it for myself, not to serve something.
Hmm.
So I always look at it as my artwork of some kind.
Hmm. I'm I'm wondering what that was like for you to do all of that video recording, that it still is like such a service to the focusing community. What was it like to have that role? Was it something that you enjoyed?
Something that I invented for myself,
Hmm.
that I did because I wanted to do it, and I uh, educated myself as much as I could about how how to edit and what equipment I need and stuff like that.
Hmm.
It was always, when I hear people saying, "Oh, you did so much for focusing well for doing that," I go, because I didn't do it for that reason. I had to do it as an art, as a part of me of understanding what this is all about, like the music and pictures and stuff like that I add in it. It was self-expression of my understanding of the speaker.
So let me say that back to you. That the the feeling inside of you was not because you were consciously doing something for the whole community. It was a very creative self-expression of your understanding of what,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
That's interesting.
I was giving my version of
Hmm.
what they were saying.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's at the core of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like when you look at one of those DVDs, you're getting Nada's understanding, in a sense, of what the person was saying.
Right?
Yeah. It's nice. That's nice to know that.
Yeah. because Gene was always himself when I was recording. It wasn't something written already and philosophied to the death and everything. He was always freshly coming with whatever he was speaking about.
Mhm.
He wasn't reading from text or anything. So the way that it touched me and my felt sense brought ideas of how to decorate it. And I
Mhm.
wasn't looking for decorations, they came by themselves.
Mhm. That's interesting. And I guess I'm imagining, I mean, I know how much I'm learning just by talking to people and doing these conversations. And I'm
Yes,
thinking the years of you doing that, you must have learned and absorbed so much.
yes. And this is what happened with TAE, which
Mhm.
is a very important part of my understanding and wanting to share or use or whatever. Uh, I remember when Mary invited me again. Mary started to invite me to everything now that Gene will do, and then the feast started. And there was this opportunity in feast, which feast it was my idea to start the feast itself, but Gene was coming up every year. It gave great opportunity to have him as natural as he can ever be.
Mhm.
And few times he never saw my DVDs, by the way. He never saw it.
Really?
And one year when I videotaped him at the feast, he sent me a message. You know, when I said that, that, and that, can you just take that out? And it was only once that he made comment like that. But otherwise, you know, he was grateful for it and
Yeah.
acknowledged me. And we felt very relaxed with each other. There was no admiration of each other or anything. It was kind of, let me see if I can find that sense of it. Two people involved in something naturally.
Mhm. Yeah, I want to just say, in case anybody doesn't know, the TAE is the thinking at the edge method. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. And
Yes, I want to do that.
yeah, and FIS is the Focusing Institute Summer School,
So,
which you initiated and went on for years and years and years,
yes.
but 12 years. But I want to go back to what you just said. I'm curious about that, the relationship between you and Gene. Um, Anyone that saw you together could see that you worked very well together, and that there was, as you're saying, there was some kind of a natural, both of you working on a project together in a natural way.
That's right.
What was it like to work with Gene so over so many years like that?
Well, you know, I didn't work with him. I was present to where he was working.
Mhm. So what you were doing was still quite separate from what he was doing, but they were also linked.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I it's interesting. He was always very kind and but he was relaxed. I remember um, my husband said to Jean, you know, I hear your voice all the time in my house. I I thought you were living with us. And they had very relaxed kind of exchange with each other. But I don't know, it just, we were naturally sometimes together, sometimes on email or something, but there was relaxed trust and reciprocity of some kind.
Yeah.
And
But I mean, I don't know if there's anyone else that would have spent as much time as you did, sort of witnessing him, listening to him, editing the DVDs. You would have heard the same thing so many times. You must have his voice kind of in your bones.
I learned what he had to say through my body.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
made
Yeah.
me.
Did he ever say anything surprising to you? Do you remember anything that he said that surprised you?
About me.
Or well, I was thinking kind of in terms of his presenting, or about you.
Well, there is actually a clip on it during TAE when I co-teach with him, and he says, "Here is Nada who is going to do the steps on the board," and he puts it in a funny way. She knows me. She spent more time with me than I spend with myself.
Yes.
So you can trust her, and she's going to correct me. So there is that ease of, we are not competing, we are doing our thing, and we are doing it out of love, not for each other, but out of love for what is there.
Yeah, what's being shared.
That's right.
So how did you get into the TAE, and what attracted you?
Well, that's a big, long story that needs to be understood by a lot of people. TAE did not exist before, and it was Mary who. It was during the time that the process model was being also written, that that Mary introduced it like this. She said, I asked Gene, how do you get to these things, the philosophical things? And he said, well, he was doing the what is it called, course in
The theory construction?
theory construction, right?
Yeah.
And he was saying, this is how it's done. And she said, oh, if you do it like that, maybe we can learn from it, and maybe I can do it with my people in my group. Mary Henrik Gendlin. And she organized the first meeting, calling it Thinking at the Edge. And it was not nothing, but very far from finished product. But he did it for 6 years, six times as presentation, and it changed every time quite a bit. So at the first presentation was in New York. He was relying on, I believe, theory construction course that he was teaching at Chicago University. That text was part of the first one. And I was recording everything. She asked me to come. So I was recording everything. And when I came home with 22 hours of footage, I thought, what is Gene doing to felt sense? I really was shocked by it. And I do have these tapes in five DVDs, the first one. And it was mixed up stuff, and he was discovering how to put it together. And I think it was I feel it was his personal need for growth as philosopher, as focusing teacher, as a human being. It was his development, and I see it TAE now as a action step that was never created for focusing by him, although encouraged, but like an action step part of his philosophy. I don't know if I said it right.
The TAE is like an action step part of his philosophy.
Let's leave that for now, and I'll come back to it because I need to put some more information on development. So then a lot of focusing people came to participate, and we were like guinea pigs actually in many ways, you know. And he was really struggling to try to get his philosophical ideas into mix of what he was presenting. So the second year when I came to videotape again, I got it. I started to see how necessary it is to exist as part of his philosophy. And I really got sold out on it, and I started to teach it, to test it on people around me, you know, and it didn't make sense or anything. But a lot of people came back. A lot of people learned, heard from other people and came. So the groups were usually about 40 people, 45 people that were coming back. And Kai Nelson got involved. She was second year or third year, she started to really help Gene in many ways, like supporting him. And then there was Teresa Dawson from Germany that even brought two groups of German-speaking people to US to do TAE in German. So the Gene doesn't travel. These are also DVDs, five DVDs. And it changed from 9 steps to I don't know how many, and it cleaned up at the end in the 14 steps and kind of 3 chunks of different things. And first 5 is it's called breaking the language barrier. And second part is crossing and patterns. And the third part is called theory building. And most of people do first 5 and then another step 9. So when it comes to step 10, 11, 12, 14, that's theory building. And it's different work, but it's still felt sensing. It's still totally engaged with his philosophy and everything else. So that happened through the 6 years of him teaching at well, you were at there as well, I guess, in Garrison.
Yeah.
And I started to teach it a little bit, and then more and more, and I really love it. And I feel that construction of, not construction, let me find the right word, creation of thinking at the edge was a natural process for Gene to develop himself. I really, I really have the sense that it was a path for him to do more than therapy, therapy-based focusing, because it started as therapy-based focusing. So in TAE, you can do therapy as well, of course, but it's aimed to something else, and it's aimed to this thinking process that the words don't mean what they say. So when it comes to words, the words of what you feel do not exist. The words that you have felt sense about do not exist, but they are there somehow ready to come out. And when you do the first 3 steps in TAE, you come to a place where you use the word, and when you ask yourself, what does that word mean? If you look at dictionary, it doesn't mean at all or a little bit, but instructing people to say it, like, what is, for instance, pause? If you look at dictionary, it has words that somehow fit and somehow don't fit. But then my teaching, I think I always have a smile when it happens. When I ask them, for instance, for me, if I say word pause, the first thing that I say is whoa, 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 whoa. And something wants to come, but it's not ready yet. When I give them examples of that kind, you can see that people get it. And this is why I still insist that they should be taught in steps first, then do crossing and theory and everything else. So this is where people discover that they have their word that was hanging there, but it wasn't able to come through public language.
I'm just taking that in because I'm thinking, how is that different from like with a felt sense, and you get a word and you know the word has so much more to it than the public understanding of it. And even if someone reflects the word back to you, hearing it back, you feel how much more it has than the word can possibly communicate.
Yes.
It reminds me of that.
Yeah, it's true. There is endless more there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So that experience of discovering that you know something more and you cannot do it with public words. There are steps, exercises that I lead people. It's not just one thing happens like that. It's kind of back and forth, and it needs to build one on the next one, and next one builds on the previous one and going forward. So it's a
Yeah.
complicated process to learn. But once when you know that they exist, the steps, then you can let them go.
Yeah, it's a little bit like focusing in that way, that once you learn the focusing steps, whatever steps you learn, then you can let go of that and find your own natural way with it.
That's
But
right.
it's interesting to me what you said a little while ago about Gene. It's like this TAE, thinking at the edge, was kind of the second application of his philosophy, focusing being the first one and used more in kind of a therapeutic way,
Chronologically.
chronologically. But TAE if I got you right, it was closer to his love of thinking and philosophy.
That's right.
And it is, I think this is what you were saying, it can be a revelation to people when they're trying to say something that they're thinking, to realize that even in their thinking, there is this so much more than the words can possibly say. And then they get interested in how to say all of that somehow so other people can understand it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or misunderstand it,
Or misunderstand it, yes.
which is kind of okay unless you get into argument. You get very misunderstood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So as a result, I personally feel that the action steps that everybody was constantly demanding and demanding on him, and he was agreeing, but was never able to say, he was saying, I bring you to the door, and that door is open to you. What you find behind the door is up to you. But unfortunately, a lot of people do focusing to feel better and then lose the open door to go forward through it. And in TAE, you are constantly in touch with your felt sense. It's not just words. You're constantly in touch that does that fit or not? How would it fit if it doesn't fit? So on. And it's not related to feeling better or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I usually say, that focusing is like a lump. No, focusing is like a wound that you go to and attend in certain way to the wound, to caring, feeling presence, have a teddy bear with it, or you like a cat or a dog, uh, how you love your dog, you can love that place that is healthy. And TAE is like a lump that wants to open up and go forward. So does that make sense to you?
I guess I'm wondering if TAE is like a lump that wants somehow to take some kind of shape.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It wants to grow. It wants to be more because it has more, and it's frustrated because it can't be said with ordinary words.
Mm-hmm.
Then you find patterns. Well, I won't teach the whole TAE, but you discover that you are doing it here and here and here and a little bit differently. You're already doing something that connects together. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all the stages of going through practice that has a lot of useful little steps and details, but you need to understand the function of each
Mm-hmm.
so that you can use it properly.
Can I just take you back a bit? You said something that I thought sounded very interesting. You said something about a misunderstanding of interaction first.
Yes,
I'd love to
I
hear that.
that I get when when I hear interaction first, somebody using it, I immediately get like lump hearing because it's misunderstood and it's misused, and it drives me crazy.
Good. Tell me.
Interaction first by Gene, and he corrected it many times himself, is that it's pre-verbal multiplicity. Pre-verbal multiplicity is interaction first. The pre-verbal, pre it's not separated yet. It exists as something. And when it opens up, you can get pieces that you need to make something new.
So initially, it's like an unseparated multiplicity.
Unseparated multiplicity. That's what Gene means by interaction first. It exists, interaction exists, but it's not separated. And when you create something and something new comes, it pieces of what belong in new creation, but not everything else.
Yeah. Only what's relevant.
Only what's relevant, exactly. And most of people in focusing world interpret it making groups that work together, and it drives me crazy. And calling it interaction.
So in the process model, when he talks about interaction first, the example he uses is that he wants to have a model that doesn't start with two separate nouns. And he uses the example of the boy and the girl. But he wants a model that instead starts with interaction. And that there's something about that interaction that makes the two people kind of who they can be together at that time. And you're saying that that interaction first is really a kind of a pre-verbal multiplicity.
That's right. That's right. And it becomes something when it's created and interacts and interact. The word interaction is the same word, but it means something that is mixing nicely together and making something. But what he's saying is it's a multiplicity that's not yet existing as separate.
And what is different about that than what you sometimes hear?
Well, let's make a group that is going to meet every Friday, and we are going to deal with lost children or whatever. So I'm inventing it. It's this grouping that is necessary to have in order to work together. But that's not what Gene is talking about when he says interaction first.
Yeah.
So the Focusing Institute is interacting very well with all the kinds of focusing processes, and but that's kind of working together rather than interacting.
Yeah. Yeah. The interacting first is more, there's something more emergent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ready to emerge.
Yeah.
And that is part of TAE as well. Anything can fit, but everything doesn't fit. And you need something. I remember I have a couple of clips of Gene and me working on my TAE, on TAE tapes. And I was trying to explain to him the three things that I was kind of interacting with. And I had very, very determined thing to say about something. He was my partner in writing, so he read back and I said, no, not like that, but this. And everything exists, but everything is not needed. there is only something that is needed, but that and that and that is not necessarily playing in the same game. Anyways, it was filmed, and I have it, but when they turned the camera off, Gene says, you and Meister Eckhart. And I didn't even read Meister Eckhart, but it just came. It just came from a process.
Yeah, that's nice. Let me just ask you if there's anything else you would like to say, or any other kind of clarifications or stories or anything that you would like to, that if you ask yourself, is there anything else that's just alive for you that you would like to say? Maybe there's other projects that you feel especially passionate about, or anything else that you would like, maybe that you would like other people to know. Anything you'd like to say. Just take a moment and see if there's anything else that we've missed.
I hope I made justice to what I understand of Gene's, well, not only Gene's philosophy, but I have faith, and I know when touch of grace comes, well, I'm differently active now. I don't teach a lot. I'm still involved in movement of focusing and TAE personally, and I live by it. I don't teach a lot because there are too many versions of people learning from different people, and it's not easy to start with my version. I have no need to. So I teach by the way, as I have focusing partnerships. My involvement with the institute and myself I'm freelance kind of in my own way, and I never miss opportunity to find sample or idea or something that comes from philosophy, from my practices, and I depend on focusing for my own lifestyle. And I have several partnerships that I really am looking forward appreciate because it's very necessary to have somebody present to listen to what I try to do by myself and not quite as successfully. And I would say focusing is handy to have for small decisions, but it's also very important to have as a prayer or meditation or uh, lifestyle
Mhm.
opportunity to stay in touch with what is going on, what is aging, what is ahead of. So I'm deeply still involved, but I'm not uh, kind of going out to preach.
Mhm.
I share rather than teach.
Yeah, it sounds like you're deeply personally involved,
Yes,
and that does come out through your partnership sharings. And occasionally it sounds like you still contribute kind of more publicly, but you don't have to pursue that.
that's right.
Yeah.
I can, but I don't accept new people.
Mhm.
Well, don't involve myself because I, I don't feel like it.
Mhm.
I've been teacher my whole life. I hope I brought enough things that have value for other people to hear, but I'm shy. My message would be don't leave Gendlin out of wherever you are going, because if you're leaving Gene out, you're not doing focusing. And it might be new practice, different practice, your own ideas of where Gene would have gone or whatever. Don't leave the reality of what Gene presented.
Wonderful. That's a very clear message.
So,
Thank you very much. You've been very, very generous with your time. I really appreciate it. And I think it was a lovely conversation.
and thank you for being so present and so capable of reflecting exactly meaning uh, as it comes, or leaving space for improving what wasn't said by me properly. I I really enjoyed, as nervous as I was to start with. I think I spoke quite a bit.
It's nice to have you as the focus of sort of on the camera rather than have you behind the camera all the time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.
Bye bye. Thank
Bye
you.
for now. Bye.